this is ANDE. I wanted to put this video together for two reasons. One, I wanted to say thank you to those of you that have agreed to participate in my journey towards getting a doctorate in educational leadership for social justice at Cal State East Bay. And this is under the research that I'm going to be doing that's titled What's Good? The Community Cultural Wealth of People Impacted by the Criminal Injustice System. And the second reason for doing this is not only to say thank you, but also to just share what this process is going to look like. So I'm going to go over as briefly as possible some of the steps that we're going to go through and some of the information. And there may be some points if you're not wanting to know all the details, you can skip ahead. So I'll try to put markers in there. But for right now, what I wanted to do is I wanted to just let everybody know that the people that are participating in this are people that have personally and directly been impacted by the criminal injustice system, and so they have experienced their own they've had their own experience with incarceration, and they have also contributed to reentry services as people come home from custody and reestablish themselves in the community. And so they're working in a peer professional position. They're contributing to the resources that are needed for people as they come home. And so it is the pairing of those two. One is the personal lived experience, and the other is the professional lived experience that they have working in reentry services. And so I appreciate you. I acknowledge that you have unique and valuable experience and wisdom to add. I feel very strongly that doing this kind of research is important to lend to scholarship and to the world of academia, because I feel like most of what's written about people is based on research that is done on the community, not with the community. And I also feel like it's usually through a negative lens or a deficit-based lens. And so I am intentionally looking at literally what's good. And I'm looking I'm using methodology, and I'm using systems that intentionally pull out and seek what is good. And so this is a strength-based process, and I'm excited about it. And I think that it's really valuable to have this information shared, that there is goodness in this space, and we don't get to talk about that enough. So I thank you for partnering with me on this. The next step that you're going to have is that I'm going to send you a link, and that link will be to a Google form, and that will give you some questions. It should take about 10 minutes for you to complete, and that's just basic demographic information. It's not fancy or anything. It's just some basic questions. And then after that, I'm going to be asking you to think of an artifact. That's what they call it, but basically an artifact is a thing. And so that thing is something that represents for you your experience in incarceration, or something that is meaningful to you, either meaningful to you when you were incarcerated or meaningful to you in the work that you do, that might help represent how do you hold hope, how do you hold space for those experiences. And so the item, the thing that you're going to bring with you, you're going to show it to me, and we're going to discuss it, and that's how we're going to start our discussion. And so the discussion is the beginning of a semi-structured interview, and that semi-structured interview can take like an hour to 2 hours. There are set questions, and we'll just have an open discussion based on those questions. We can come off of those questions at certain points if it makes sense to do that, but there is a set of questions. And given that it's COVID, we'll be doing this through Zoom. And so when I say bring it with you, I mean bring it to your Zoom room, wherever you're going to be logging in on Zoom. But you're going to be showing that to me, and you're going to be explaining what it is to me, and that's how we're going to start our discussion together. And so I want you to start to think about what the item might be. Then we go into that semi-structured interview that I talked about. Like I said, it could take about an hour to 2 hours, depending on how long we want to stay together in that conversation. And this is the part where if you want to skip forward, I'll put a little clip on there how long it will take to skip forward. But this piece here will be about the theoretical lens that I'm using. So you do not need to know this information. You do not need to hold that in your brain or anything like that. It will be available to you throughout the process. But I do want to share with you what helped inform the questions that are designed, and what this process is looking like from that perspective. So the first thing that I want to share is originally this was generated from a theory called cultural capital, and that was in 1977 when two men called Bourdieu and Passeron, they came up with the concept of cultural capital. And they basically said that communities, elite communities, have cultural capital that they pass from one generation to the next that helps each next generation come up. And so these are not financial assets, but these are strengths, skills, access, opportunities, things like that. So if you think about it as if I am in a school if I'm an elite community, I'm in a school with an elite community, and I am a high school student and I'm looking for summer work, and everybody that I know, or a lot of people that I know, have businesses, family businesses, and they're, well off, then that means that I have opportunities to gain employment. I have opportunities to build my network, to have professional references, to get experience, to have choice, and things like that. And so these are the things that they were talking about when they were talking about cultural capital that gets passed from one generation to a next, and it helps them each get ahead. And they said that you could either have this by being a member of this community, the elite community, or you could have this by putting your kid into a community, in a school that has that type of community, and then you could also tap into that. And so that was the original theory. And then something came along called critical race theory, and you may have heard about it in the news recently because Trump tried to dismantle this, along with, a bunch of other things he tried to dismantle. I'm going to stay focused. But critical race theory was something that was born out of the legal field, and it was a perspective that the scholars and the practitioners in that field had, that they recognized and were naming the fact that systems are not built for people of certain races, mostly Black, Indigenous, and people of color, to succeed, to survive, to thrive. And so these communities were not built, these systems were not built for them to be able to succeed. And they were structurally built in a way that continued to have advantages for people that were in power. And so what the critical race theory does is it's a lens that they apply to a policy or to a practice or to a space, and they say, how does this impact people based on race? And so again, it was born out of legal, but it made its way into historical contexts and perspectives, into social services, into all different fields, and so including schools. And so Yosso, Tara J. Yosso in 2005 was one to talk about how the school system is actually not built either for students of color. And so if students of color survive, it's not because it was built for them to survive. It was because they survived in spite of how it was built. And so she does this really amazing analysis of this system, and really kind of brings a lot of light to this field. And she names 6 categories where she basically says, hey, Bourdieu and Passeron, you guys totally missed the fact that communities of color actually do have other assets and strengths that you don't know or that you didn't name. And even in our own communities, we might not recognize them ourselves as assets and strengths. So that's also kind of an aha moment. And so what she's saying is there are at least 6 areas that I can actually build theory around. And so she names 6 categories. And those 6 categories are aspirational capital, linguistic capital, familial capital, social capital, navigational capital, and resistance capital. So I'm going to break down those 6. And before I do break them down, what I want to explain is I'm essentially taking what she did in a school system and I am moving it over to the reentry services, and so the reentry community. And so I'm saying that just like she was able to identify and name and honor the strengths that people have in the students of color have in a school setting, I believe that people that have survived and navigated through the criminal injustice system also have strengths in these areas. And so the areas that, and I'm going to basically take the theory and I'm going to move it over to people impacted by criminal injustice system. And so if you look at that, you can see aspirational capital is what I did was I picked the lyric of the song We Gonna Be Alright by Kendrick Lamar. And so if you think about that song and you think about essentially what they're saying is, I'm not giving you a pass on what you've done to my community. What I am saying is we're going to survive beyond it. And we are going to hold dreams for our children in spite of this. And we're going to find a way to survive and overcome. And so it is that motivation, that aspiration. So it's the aspirational capital. And so that's the first capital that we're looking at. The second one that we're talking about is the linguistic capital. So this one is it's any form of communication. So it could be like whistles, it could be speaking, tone, words, certain words that are specific to a community, specific to what's happening in custody, words that you might use there. But the other part of it is that it's forms of communication that I've seen in the field that I've been working in, and it's being able to read somebody really quick, being able to know when you're in a group who are the different roles in the group. And that I feel is something that comes from being in a situation where you had to figure that out really quick. And so that's a skill, that's an asset that people, haven't named necessarily. And so the one that I chose for the title was Beats Off the Chest, because one of my family members was explaining how being in a space where they've taken joy, they've taken everything that could do that, bring you joy, they've taken it away. And yet I am going to create this still, and you can't take that away from me. And how that skill of being able to create beats off the chest can also earn you commissary. It's a form of entertainment. It's a form of building relationship and navigating a space in a way that gives you strength. And so beats off the chest was one of the ones that I thought about for linguistic capital. The next one is familial capital. And familial is the term that I used is wisdom of elders. And so it's kind of that thought of basically like those that have more wisdom than you, because it's not specific about that you have to be older and younger, but it can be that you have more wisdom than somebody who's new. And so if you think about when somebody comes into custody for the first time and there's somebody else who kind of understands what that system is like, what does that, what good do they pass? How do they help them understand? How are you going to navigate this time? How are you going to do this? Emotionally, physically, what is the moral code in this space? What are the things that are unspoken? Things like that. And so it extends beyond familial blood, but it goes beyond that to kinship. It goes to play cousins. It goes to the community that you form, the family that you form for yourself in different environments, even just the families that you form. So it's that extension, and mostly it's the passage of knowledge from those that have the wisdom to those that are in the position of needing it. So it's that passage of knowledge. And then the next one, which is kind of similar, is social capital. Social capital is more networks. So it's looking at when you leave custody, what networks do you tap into? When you're in custody, what networks do you tap into? How do you figure out what are the things that you need? How do you figure out how to access education in custody? How do you figure out how to access anything that you need when you're in custody? And then when you get out, how do you figure out how to access food, clothing, housing, all of the different things that you're going to need to gain stability? So it's those networks and it's those systems and it's so that's social capital. Another one that comes alongside of that is navigational capital, which is similar, except for it familial is external because somebody's passing you knowledge. Social is external because somebody's passing you network and access. Navigational is intrinsic. It's you, it's inside of you. And so not everybody has this. Think about like the dude who knew how to get everything. Think about the tia who knows, or the aunt who knows how to help anybody in the family when they need something. That's the aunt that everybody calls to say like they know how to do this. So it is what I was calling the inner hustle. It's the person who knows how to navigate things and how to get things done, how to accomplish the goals and navigate systems. So that's navigational capital. And then the last one is resistance capital. And the first one that comes to mind is the Black Panther Party, who put together food programs, breakfast programs for kids in their communities, mental health care programs for people that were impacted by the criminal justice system and the community violence. And then the title that I gave it was Movement, because I wanted to draw attention to the fact that we had an entire community in the United States that was self-sustaining. It was a Black Liberation Party that put together a whole entire self-sustaining community, and that the government essentially took out. And so that is one of the most impactful forms of resistance that I have seen, and we so seldom talk about it or know about it. And so that's why I wanted to give it that name, to honor that. At the same time, I also want to honor the fact that when a grandmother is with their grandchild and they're telling them a story in the evening to put them to bed, to say, this is your place in this process. This is what your great-grandparents did in their place in the process. It's that storytelling that goes from generation to generation to show what power we have in the resistance, or in the revolution, or in whatever it is you want to call it, but that we all have a power and we all have a role. And so that's the resistance capital. When you put all of those things together, those are the different forms of community cultural wealth that I believe exist in people that are uniquely impacted by a system that was not built to help them, the criminal and justice system. And yet, here you are, doing what you're doing. And so we are going to work together to collect the information, and then we are going to pick the highlights that we feel are the most compelling, and then we're going to write a story about that. And so I am responsible for writing 2 chapters in order to graduate. And so I will be sharing that with you as we go. You will be able to feed back to me. You will be able to clarify. You will be able to add to it. And so once that's done, that will be the dissertation. And that's what will be presented. This will likely be presented on the website and on a podcast or a vlog or both. And those things will include your image, your name, your artifact, and the story that we come up with together. After that, I personally want to keep going with this, so I'm not real sure what's going to happen after that. But again, we'll be continuing to communicate, and I just wanted to say thank you, and that this is a journey that I feel very strongly about, because I have lost loved ones to systems, and I have had the privilege of working on the periphery of the system. And so I have seen the strengths and I have seen the assets that people bring, and I really want to honor those. And so I hope that you are able to join me in this process, and I look forward to it. All right, so look for the link and I will see you later. Thanks. Bye.